Shout with joy to God all the earth.
Sing to the glory of his name.
Offer him glory and praise.
Sing to the glory of his
Sing
name.
to the
Sing to the glory of his
Sing
name.
to the
Sing to the glory of his name.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Devoratorium. My name is Darnay DeVore, and I'm going to be your host. On today's episode, The King and the Magical Witch of Endor. Yeah, some of you may be thinking this sounds a lot like a sword and sorcery tale, and it does. But it's actually about losing faith, losing your faith, and it surrounds the first king of Israel, King Saul. So in this story, we're going to see harsh consequences of losing your faith and how it can bring down even the greatest of men. Now, full disclosure, some of your translations may say witch, some may say medium, some may say spiritist. The Bible lumps all those together. There are distinctions between them, but the Bible lumps witches, sorcerers, mediums, spiritists, lumps them all together just for the commonality of what's going on, okay? They tend to be intermediaries between this world and the next. Israel was forbidden to deal with mediums, spiritists, witchcraft, and any other ungodly activities or forces. We see in Exodus 22, verse 18, God commands the nation of Israel to kill them. We see in Leviticus 19:31, God is telling the Israelites, do not turn to them. In Leviticus 20, verse 27, he reminds them again to kill them. And Deuteronomy 18, 9 through 12, God is telling Israel that they are detestable. Okay, so we have a very good idea of how God views witchcraft, spiritism, mediums, and everything within that ilk. So, question on the side, is magic even real? It's okay if we disagree about this. Some people say no, other people say yes. Those who say no, it's not real, they think it's just a bunch of trickery. I personally believe that it is real because God went through a pretty big extent to explain to Israel, don't mess with them. Stay away from them. When you see them, kill them, but just they are detestable in his sight. But if you don't agree, if you think that magic, even in the Bible, is not true, is not real, that's okay too. Bottom line, I believe that magic comes from demons. I believe that the forces of evil, Satan, the demons, they all have power, but their power has been given to them by God, but is still subservient to God. God has power. He is sovereign over everyone and everything that is in existence. So this is God allowing them to exercise some level of power. We call it magic, but it's actually demonic power that's being utilized. That's just my view. So our story today comes from 1 Samuel 28, 3 through 19. And this is dealing with King Saul and the prophet Samuel. Every king of Israel had a prophet. The prophet was a mouthpiece between God and the king. So whatever God wanted the king to know, the God would tell the prophet, and then the prophet would tell the king. If the king had a response to God, the king would tell the prophet would tell God. And so the prophet was very important. In verse 3 of this passage, we see that Samuel, who's a prophet of King Saul, he dies. He dies, but King Saul banned all the mediums from the nation of Israel. So far, so good. When we look at verse 6, we see that King Saul has become afraid of the invading Philistines, the same group that produced Goliath, whom young David defeated some time ago. Now they're invading the nation of Israel. King Saul is afraid, okay? And he inquires of the Lord, what's going on? What do I do? But he doesn't get any answer. So in verse 7, King Saul says to his men, find me a medium, find me a witch. Now, didn't God say to kill them? Right? Didn't God say that they were detestable to him? Right? God won't answer me, so I'm going to go elsewhere. This is where the faith is lacking. If God doesn't answer us immediately, we tend to look elsewhere for an answer. If God doesn't answer us in an answer that we want, we'll look elsewhere for the answer. That's a loss of faith. Sometimes God's answer is no. Sometimes God's answer is don't worry about it. And sometimes God does not give his answer until much, much later on. No matter what, we must continue believing in the one true God because there is no other. So big, powerful, good-looking King Saul, according to 1 Samuel 9:2, he's afraid. He's afraid and has lost his faith. The opposite of faith is fear, and in fear, we tend to do desperate things. In this case, King Saul tries to reach out to a witch that should have been killed or driven out long ago. A witch is found in hiding in a little place called Endor. 1 Samuel 28, verse 8, it reads, "So Saul disguised himself, putting on other clothes, and at night he and 2 men went to the woman. 'Consult a spirit for me,' he said, 'and bring up for me the one that I name.'" We have to understand something, that King Saul was royalty, the first of a nation, the first king of Israel. Everyone looked to him as king for direction, for guidance, and strength. And here he is disguised and sneaking off at night to go see a witch that they were forbidden to deal with. Now, how low we see have the mighty fallen. Mighty King Saul is disguising himself because he knows he can't allow himself to be seen by the nation of Israel doing this thing. Verse 9 through 10, the witch knows better. She knows if she performs any magic, King Saul, which is the man sitting right in front of her in disguise, will kill her. That's how well King Saul was disguised. Even the witch had no idea who he was. But King Saul swears by God that she will not be punished. So even though, once again, God said, punish them, drive them out, right? Kill them. King Saul swears by God's name, none of that will happen. Once again, disobeying God's orders. King Saul wanted to raise the spirit of the prophet Samuel, who had died earlier in verse 3. So in verse 11 through 15, the witch brings up the spirit of Samuel. Now, once again, whether it was her power, utilizing the demonic power that they channel, or whether it was God's power allowing this to happen because she was a fake and phony, that's irrelevant to the story. It really is. This is all about faith. So the witch brings up the spirit of Samuel. King Saul finally gets to hear from his former prophet what exactly is going on. In verse 16 through 17, Samuel tells Saul that God is no longer with him and has given leadership of Israel to young David. But why? Why, you may ask, did God turn on King Saul, the first anointed king of Israel? The following is among the most heartbreaking passages I've ever read, because this explains why God has turned his back on King Saul. 2 Samuel 28:18 through 19. Because you did not obey the Lord or carry out his fierce wrath against the Amalekites, the Lord has done this to you today. The Lord will deliver both Israel and you into the hands of the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. The Lord will also give the army of Israel into the hands of the Philistines. What? God did not forget King Saul's lack of obedience against the Amalekites in 1 Samuel chapter 15. God ordered King Saul to eliminate them, every man, woman, child, everyone, and King Saul didn't. He didn't. When God pronounces judgment on a nation and wants them completely wiped out, it happens. It happened with Sodom and Gomorrah, and now here it was the Amalekites, but God decided to use, rather than his own direct power, he decided to use the nation of Israel, his chosen nation, and they failed through King Saul. So because of King Saul's disobedience, Israel was being punished. So Saul was already feeling pretty low by this point. This news, this passage just dropped him past that. He was on his face, a shell of a man that he should have been, because his life, his legacy, his kingdom, and everything that made him great was over. Why? Because he did not obey God. Even the hopes and dreams that Saul had of his sons taking over the throne when his own time was done was gone. God took the kingdom from Saul and his entire family. Okay, that was heart-wrenching for King Saul. He can't promise his offspring that this throne is yours. No, as a matter of fact, his offspring would die with him within a day. So that's why I labeled this story a story of faith, because when you lose your faith, fear replaces that faith. And people of faith stand pretty tall, as did King Saul. When you read about the description of King Saul, he was taller than just about everybody in Israel. He was tall, he was good looking, he looked like a king that all of us would love to have. But once he lost his faith, fear took over. And when he was in fear, you saw him disguising himself and sneaking off to go visit a witch. What are your fears? What are those fears that you have in your life that need to be turned around by faith in God so you can stand tall, knowing that whatever those fears are or have been, that God's got this, that God is going to get this and he's going to handle it on our behalf, whether we realize it or not. King David had no idea that he was going to be anointed king. He was just some farm boy and the youngest of his brothers. But through Saul's sin, King Saul's sin, David was anointed king after King Saul. Why? Because King David had a faith that King Saul did not have. So how can we apply our faith, the faith that we have in God? How do we apply that in our lives? How can we conquer all the fears of our lives through that faith? Just something to think about. Keep your mind and heart in Scripture. Keep reading the Bible. Unlike King Saul, don't worry about the invading armies. Don't worry about any of the ups and downs of this world. If we have faith in God, God is going to see it through on our behalf. Even if we have no idea what God's plans are, we know he's working the plan and we trust him. We trust him. Who do you trust? I want to thank everybody for joining me today. Stay tuned for the next video.